Have you ever had that moment of realization where you look at yourself, look at the people you're surrounded by, and go like, "Why am I here?" You're surrounded, and yet everything feels superficial and empty. Almost like it doesn't matter if people are around you or not. You feel alone. It's been 6 years now, and with a little knowledge in psychology and a lot of time trying, here's a three-step remedy for a superficial social life that I've discovered. So when I started to study psychology, I started to gain clarity on my relationships. The thing is that a relationship is composed by two individuals that are connected. And the first realization was to open my eyes. In all of those superficial relationships, I was the common link. Be careful with that because realizing this will probably feel like a punch in your ego. But I had to take a look at myself in the mirror, and to be truly honest, I needed to ask myself why I was being part of these relationships if I knew they weren't positive. Because deep down, I knew that these weren't going to last that long. I couldn't visualize my older self hanging out with the same people that I used to hang out with. And here's a helpful framework that has helped me figure it out. You have to visualize it and ask yourself just one question. If you had a son or a daughter, would you want him or her to have that kind of relationships? And after studying my relationships back then, I realized that there's no way. These aren't the kind of people that I would my son to be surrounded by. Looking back, I'm now able to see it, but when you're in the middle of it, it's blurry. And relationships are a big part of human life, and learning how to place yourself within those and set your boundaries in these kind of dynamics, well, it's not that easy. Because first of all, there's no real education about relationships, and that's something that I think the system's lacking. When you're young, your parents are pretty much the only people that are teaching you about human relationships and how to behave in those. Second thing is that while you're in the relationship, you can be objective, and extracting yourself from it can be a struggle. It's a game of testing, trials and errors, really. But you have precious informations to help you understand what's going on, and those are called emotions. Emotions are built to send you signals, especially when it comes to relationships and human interactions. Humans are social creatures, right? We need to be surrounded by people, and we need connection. We need to belong to our environment. The problem is when you're not that confident, it's easy to lose yourself in this because when you're young and especially a teenager, you're lacking a defined self of identity. But you then start to act, feel, and do just like the people around you. You adapt and you blend in almost like a social chameleon. You do what you feel like you're supposed to do and you act accordingly to people's expectations of you. And I realized that I was doing this constantly. This wasn't who I was nor who I wanted to be. And when I started to stop engaging that way, I found kind of the answer. I was acting like this and keeping those friendships and those relationships because I wanted to belong and I needed it. The matter is that I didn't truly know who I was. So, by rule of proximity, I was linked to the people around me without really choosing it. And I think here's the key to true freedom. I think that in your relationships, when you realize that you can pick and choose your relationships based on the connection that you have and the quality of those, well, you're sitting on a gold mine. At that point, when you realize that, there is no coming back. When you know that you have the keys, you need to find the door. And it was tough, I'm not gonna lie. But the tougher the test, the bigger the lesson. The main obstacle was probably my brain that didn't want me to figure this out because it would mean that most of my relationships at the time were fake and I had to leave them and be on my own for a while. But realizing this has opened so many doors and the opportunities always comes at a cost and you have to be ready in that scenario to stand alone to find your true relationships. So, if I wanted to get out of those superficial relationships, I had to start with the one that I had with myself. So what's next after all this honesty? Well, for me, it's all about seeking. It's like knowing something's up and not knowing what rights looks like it. And here I feel like is when you're supposed to fall in the black hole, the one everyone out there seems to be talking about. There's that period of time when you don't want to hang out with your old friends anymore because you find out that these were superficial relationships. But at the same time, you don't have new ones and you don't even know where to look for people like you. And I remember feeling like I don't like where I am right now, but I have nowhere else to go. And it's a tough spot, but what do we do now? Well, I think we have to allow ourselves to get lost and wander a little bit. We need to try and explore looking for something else. Because as long as you're being as honest as possible, you end up making significant findings about yourself. And that will pay off eventually. It's just a matter of time. My mindset at the time was, and still is, by the way, anything else will feel better than doing the same thing over and over again, knowing that it's not the right thing to do. This is only the beginning. You have to remember that we are on a life mission here. And the goal is to understand how we work, the structure of ourselves. Because I'm convinced that this is a crucial part of shaping identity and it's mandatory, really. So the question is, who are you now and who do you aspire to become? And we're often asked when we're young what we want to become when we grow up. But I don't think that's the right question at all. How can you know who you want to be if you don't even know who you are yet? That doesn't make any sense. And I think it starts with understanding the current you, your personality, your values, your goals, everything that sets you apart from other people, what makes you uniquely you. And this was for me extremely confusing. And I was like, this sounds about right, but where do I start in all of this process? As a 17-year-old, I had no clear vision about what I wanted in life. And what I found out is that when you're betting on your relationships to bring meaning into your own life, you go down a twisty road. In my opinion, you have to first get it right with yourself if you want to experience it with other people. So there had the starting point. I had to start with myself. Of course, as an adolescent, I thought that it would take me, 4 to 6 months. But 6 years deep in, I'm still wondering and trying to explore. But I've found great hints about who I am and what I expect from my relationships. You have to be careful though, because the black hole will always try to pull you back to who you were. And its goal is that you never see the truth and that you stay where you are because it's comfortable and it's easier than what you have to do. And just like a puzzle, you're trying 99 pieces that won't fit. But when you do find that one piece that fits, it's going to be all worth it. It's often easier to remove the pieces that don't fit in the puzzle rather than finding the new ones that do. Because you can see the puzzle and you can recognize the mismatched parts. So that's what I did. I started by taking off all the parts that prevented me from finding new ones. It's very hard to know for sure what you want in life, but it's fairly easy to know what you don't want in your life though. If you've done enough trial and errors, you'll figure this out pretty quickly. And that's when I began to reshape my life. I had gained enough clarity and information about myself to be able to choose and filter everything that I wanted and everything that I didn't. I started to change the composition of my life. And overall, I stopped doing what other people expected from me and start exploring for myself. And the main obstacle that was in my way was probably to feel bad for other people. And one of the biggest shifts that I did was learning how to distance myself from the weight of other people's problems and feelings. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't feel empathy. What I'm saying though is that other people's problems around you shouldn't be the reason why you limit yourself in life. And when you're 17 and you're going through that, you're telling yourself that it's empathy, but rather it's the black hole trying to pull you back in. Because empathy is a blessing, but unfortunately, it's a limited resource, and there is that thin line between empathy and toxicity. When you let yourself absorb the negative emotions of all the people around you, you end up locked up in toxic relationships. However, if you're able to use empathy as what it is, you're going to have deeper connections and a better understanding of all the people around you. But what I'm trying to say is that if you want to get to know who you are and what you want in life, you'll first have to accept the facts that you don't know anything about yourself. You have to be willing to do the work to discover more, whatever the cost. But this is part of the journey, and this is what makes you a distinct person. Going through adversity and challenges will bring you meaning. You don't have to be heroic, you just have to be honest. And I'd say that by far being honest and truthful was the hardest thing, yet the best thing that I've ever did. The nice thing is that any day you can wake up and decide that it's your day and this is the day you're going to start to be as honest as possible with yourself. That being said, it is crucial that at the same time you explore the reasons why you feel unable to be true with yourself at the moment. And what really helped me along the way is that this idea that I'm here to learn and I don't know anything and that's just all right, because we're all born as blank slates, just knowing nothing really. And the key is to keep learning and growing throughout your life. But you have to remember that creating meaningful relationships and getting away from a superficial social life is not a change that's going to happen overnight. It requires patience and time, like everything that's meaningful. And the only true weapon that you have is hope that it's going to get better. I mean, you don't really have a choice, do you? Because what's the goal of your life when you think about it? Is it to be comfortably surrounded by people but feeling empty? Or is it to discover and learn as much as you can about yourself and create those meaningful relationships that you wished you had? Anyway, you'll find me here if you need it. And in the meantime, you just trust the process.